So for learning objective 3, identifying structures in the plasma membrane, and I'm going to tell you about their function. So there are proteins that are peripheral, that are just attached to the surface of the membrane that don't go through the fatty acids. And then there are integral proteins that do go all the way through. And those integral proteins that go all the way through, they can be anchored in those amongst those fatty acids because they're amino acids that have nonpolar R groups on them. And those nonpolar R groups are like, hey, let's hang out with all of these fatty acids because none of us like water, so we're just going to hang out here. So we have 6 major functions of membrane proteins. I'm going to focus on just a few of them, but I'll tell you about all of them. I'm going to tell you about transport, enzymatic activity, cell recognition, receptors. Do I have receptors on here? I should have receptors on here. Anyway, so these are the 6 major functions. So as you can see, all of these proteins are going all the way through, all of these purple blobs. So transport is just basically like a door or a window. The function is to let molecules into the cell or out of the cell. And sometimes that can just happen without any investment of energy. And sometimes it takes energy to pump things into or out of the cell. And that's what these orange dots are doing here. Is they're getting zapped by ATP. And ATP is going to make those orange dots get out of the cell. Enzymes, which are those little protein machines, they're large molecules, but small, I guess, compared to the size of a cell. Enzymes that have functions that are connected to each other just makes sense to have them physically next to each other. So maybe we have an enzyme that turns red triangle here into blue square. But the end product that we want is green dot. Well, it makes sense to have these 2 enzymes next to each other so that we can turn red triangle into green dot fairly easily. An analogy I always use with this is if you drive up to Atlanta from Auburn, you're going to pass by the Kia plant in West Point, Georgia. And the Kia plant, they manufacture cars there. And all around in that area, in Russell County, Alabama, and in Georgia, just right around there, you find there are all these companies that make parts for Kia cars. Which makes sense because the Kia plant, maybe they can't make all of the parts there on the site, but it just makes sense that they should make the parts somewhere nearby. So imagine that instead of red triangle, this is a seat belt. And instead of blue square, this is a car chassis with a seat belt on it. And here's your finished car. So you want those parts, the machinery that makes these transformations possible to be close together, and a plasma membrane can anchor enzymes like this together. All right, signal transduction, or this is described in your book as receptor proteins. They do something that it's kind of like transport, but not quite. So signal transduction, there's a protein that is called a receptor, and then there is a molecule here shaped kind of like this orange, like cheese wedge, that fits into the receptor. Now, the signaling molecule doesn't go through to the other side. It doesn't go from the outside to the inside of the molecule. It's not getting transported. But what it is doing is it's relaying a signal. So the signaling molecule binds to the receptor, and that tells the receptor to change on the inside of the cell. So it's kind of like this signaling molecule is like ringing the doorbell, and this piece here is getting detached, kind of like because the doorbell ringing, which means that the cell now is going to do something in response to that signal, Just like if someone rings the doorbell at your house, maybe you get up and go and answer and find out who's there, or if you're like me, you hide and wait for them to go away because you don't like people coming to your house without expecting them. But that's signal transduction. The signal is on the outside of the cell, it stays on the outside of the cell, but it causes some kind of change on the inside of the cell. And this is how a lot of your nerves function. They actually don't send molecules into the adjacent cells to the adjacent nerves, but they relay signals from one neuron or nerve cell to the next one. Another function of these plasma membrane proteins is that they can kind of serve like the numbers on your house. They can help cells to recognize each other. So in this case, we've got a glycoprotein. So that's a protein with some carbohydrates on it. Remember that glyco means sugar-like. And that glycoprotein tells this cell that's next to it that, hey, you are my neighbor, and this is exactly where you're supposed to be, and we should just get along with each other. So that's cell-cell recognition. So these two cells are going to be good neighbors to each other. So they don't, if cells don't recognize each other, maybe, and these cell recognition proteins, glycoproteins aren't there, maybe this other cell won't connect to it or won't exchange signals with it, or may try and even destroy the cell if it doesn't recognize it as being the cell that's supposed to be there. Speaking of that, we can also, in multicellular organisms like you and I, if we want to form large swaths of continuous sheets or organs or tissues of cells, we don't want them to just fall apart, so we can use proteins to join them together. So intercellular joining is another function of membrane proteins. And then the last one I want to tell you about is, again, something that we see in multicellular organisms, not in unicellular organisms, is that these proteins may be attached to elements of the cytoskeleton, like those actin microfilaments, can grab onto, if they're trying to do something like make a pseudopod for an amoeba or something like that, these actin microfilaments can grab onto the proteins that are in the plasma membrane and change the shape of the cell. So if you're a large multicellular organism, you don't just have your cells, but you have something that's going on outside of the cells called an extracellular matrix that helps to anchor all of the cells together, maybe helps the cells communicate with each other. So it's kind of like cell recognition and intracellular joining are going on, as well as some other stuff. And that's something else that these plasma membrane proteins can accomplish for you.